Welcome to Crawlspace. I'm Tim here today with Lance in the Empty Frames Wormtown Studios. What's up, Lance?
How's it going today?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I'm really happy to be here in the Empty Frames Crawlspace Wormtown Studios because you and I just recently got a glimpse into the mind of many serial killers, mass murderers, mass shooters, and it feels good to be in the safe confinements of our nice black box here.
Yes, our guest Christopher Duett has written with a lot of killers.
Chris Duett said that he has an itch that just can't be scratched, and that itch is his desire to find out what makes serial killers, mass murderers, mass shooters tick. Everyone from Richard Ramirez to
Whitey Bulger. So really an endlessly fascinating interview with Christopher Duett, who also wrote an article about this subject for Vice.com, which is linked to in our show notes.
The article, I've been pen pals with nearly 50 murderers and serial killers. The term pen pal is a very easy way to categorize what it is, but he'll tell you that he doesn't really consider himself pals, except for one.
So please enjoy this conversation and follow him on Twitter and follow us on Twitter at CrawlspacePod. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you very much for listening. Welcome to Crawlspace. Christopher Duett, how are you tonight?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing pretty well.
Really excited to talk to you.
I'm very excited to be on the show.
Well, thanks a lot.
We didn't know anything about you until we saw this.
As you shouldn't.
We saw this link that went to a Vice article from November of 2014. The title of it was, I've been pen pals with nearly 50 murderers and serial killers. And as Tim and I do what we do, we couldn't help but click on it, read about 2 sentences and say, this guy has to be on.
Not my choice of a title,
but a great title.
It gets the point across. It's fairly, you know what you're about to read.
It's a really interesting hobby that you have. So I guess the first question, the most natural question I feel like is why?
I remember in 1989, my parents used to always have the news on. I remember the execution of Ted Bundy saturated the news. You couldn't get away from it. I remember watching the news coverage. I remember watching all the people celebrating outside of the death chamber, and that stuck with me for some reason. And then a few years later, we had Danny Rolling on the loose in Gainesville. I was probably about 7 or 8 years old at the time, so I didn't really, get what was going on. Another thing that covered the news around here, at least, I don't know how big it was nationally at that time. I remember asking my mom about it, and she told me, she goes, he is murdering people, and she even told me he would pose their bodies for shock value, or and I remember going, oh my fucking God. Like, as a little kid, I was like, who would do that? That's crazy. Around that same year, my favorite uncle was arrested for a pretty brutal attempted murder. I spent the next several years, my weekends were on a prison yard visiting him. When you visit him, he'll say, oh, that guy over there is in for this, that guy. And it just breeds more curiosity about, this deviant behavior. And even so, that was a side of my uncle I'd never think that my uncle would, stab a person multiple times, leave the knife in him and walk away. It didn't make any sense to me. So I grew up, got to my teenage years. As my teenage years, I was a total shithead.
Just like Lance was.
Yeah. Weren't we all?
The serial killer thing never left. I always, would read books, things like that throughout school and everything. I got a little bit older, into my early 20s and whatnot. One of my good friends that I lived with at the time, he was arrested for, bank robberies, things like that. He's doing 20 years in federal prison now. So, I was always surrounded by this behavior, and it always, it always found its way to me and everything. But I've always had a fascination with it as well.
So it seems like the fascination is, this person as someone else, and there's a different side of them that is there as well underneath it all.
100%. That's what it is. Me having that personal connection to that made it more intriguing to me. Eventually, it got to a point where I could consume the books, the TV shows, everything. It wasn't scratching the itch, and I just could not get enough information. And I was devouring textbooks, and it just wasn't cutting it. So one day, I sent out a handful of letters to a handful of serial killers. I didn't know what to expect. About probably 3 weeks or so later, I have a letter in the mail that, it's addressed to me I'm not familiar with the person. I look at the name, it's scribble scrabble, and I'm like, what does that say? I take a closer look and I see it says Richard Ramirez. I rushed inside, opened it up, and from there I had to talk to everyone. I had to dig deeper and deeper and deeper.
Before we get into what Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, wrote to you, do you think that there was something in your environment that drew people or drew you to people that had this penchant for violence?
That's kind of hard for me to answer because I like to think that, there was no major dysfunction surrounding me or anything like that. I mean, even now, I think I'm fairly well adjusted in society and whatnot. But I personally have been and still kind of am a rebellious person. With that comes, problems, trouble. I got a little older. I joined what some people deem as a gang. I've never been in drugs or I don't drink alcohol, nothing like that. I mean, there's been a lot of violence. I'm not sure if anything drew me to it. Possibly my behavior and my maybe seeing a part of me and other people, and maybe that's the draw. But that would be subconscious. It was nothing really up front like that.
I will say this fascination that you have with killers and with the psychology behind why people act on these violent impulses. You're right at home here in the podcast world, in the podcast realm, because especially the true crime one, because everyone is thinking about psychology pretty much the entire time they're listening, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the great thing about it. People can tend to treat you like a weirdo because of your natural curiosity and fascination. And when there's nothing bad about it, it's a healthy fascination. If it's a healthy fascination, it should be nurtured. So it's nice that there's, true crime podcasts. There's, the TV shows and things like that maybe some people might use that destructively, but I think a lot of people have a really healthy fascination with it. And I think a lot of good comes from that.
I think so too. I mean, we see it with CrimeCon. Several thousand people go to a convention about true crime, a yearly convention, and it's all to learn. Ultimately, it's all to learn about psychology and about how to live safer lives. But some people are confused by that.
Yeah, no, I won't say everybody, but I think a lot of people are like me that, they have this itch that can't be scratched, and it's just, you just want to devour more and more information. And my wife hates it. She doesn't like it. She didn't like it when I had, all I don't want to call them pals. They weren't my pals, but, when I had all the correspondences and they would send me things. Some of them would send cards to give to her. And she was like, I don't want anything to do with that. She doesn't like it, and that's fine. That's not her thing. And it's not for everybody. But I think the people like myself, like you guys, I think there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with what we're doing. And I think in due time, it's going to show that it's a productive interest.
It's almost a productive experiment, if you will. What you've done is your own personal experiment in the psychology of these, people would call them monsters, and you went into the heads of these monsters. And it's an experiment, and it's a social experiment, and you don't have to like it, but it's there. It's not going away. Richard Ramirez happened. The Golden State Killer happened.
Absolutely. This is as realistic as it gets. And that's another thing, is that because I've had the experience that I've had, I've spoken to these people. I knew a lot of their cases very well. I knew a lot of direct information from them. So now I don't let my kids play outside by themselves and people are like, that's a bit excessive. I'm like, no, it's not. There are horrible people out there that do horrible things to other people, and they are real. I know them. There's always a barrier there. I think that, me getting past that barrier, I'm very in tune to the reality of it. It's all very, very real.
It must be really bizarre for you when people say to you, it's just because of that morbid hobby that you have with your writing to serial killers, and then your answer ultimately is, yeah, it is because of the hobby I have writing these animals, and I know they exist, so it's not fiction. It's really interesting that people will separate that in their brain. Someone like Ted Bundy, a lot of people probably think it's easier to consider him fiction.
That's fine when they're in the movie. It's fine when they're on the TV show and all that. When it comes to reality, they don't want to confront the truth that these people are very real. Yeah. And they're very dangerous. And I mean, it can put other people in, It's just it's very bad, and it's not something that people want to think about. They really don't. Um, so I mean, having that knowledge myself, I mean, it's something that I can't help but to think about.
Yep.
But look at what you just said about it. You said that you won't let your kids play outside alone. So technically speaking, they're more safe than the kids next door whose parents do let them play outside alone.
Statistically, the chances of something, them being a victim of violent crime by a an unknown person, it's not through the roof. I'm not going to pretend like this is, but it does happen. It does happen.
There's no reason to not be aware of and take measures to just make sure you're not that like 0.01% that it happens to on that particular day.
You don't want to be on the wrong end of that. When you realize how real that stuff is, I don't live in a bubble, but there's situations that can be avoidable. And looking at all these killers and how they operate and how they chose their victims, how they victimized people, I mean, you can learn from that stuff, and you can use that as a tool to protect yourself, to protect other people. I mean, it's there.
That's a good segue to getting back to 2009, right? When you got the letter from Richard Ramirez?
Yeah, I think it was 2009.
What did you write to him, and what did he write back?
I wrote a pretty standard introduction letter. I would introduce myself, tell them why I'm writing them, tell them a little bit about myself, try and make them comfortable, try to build a rapport, or at least make them comfortable enough to where even if they were suspicious of me, to that where they would write me back. And even if they were like, I don't know about you, if they wrote me back, I know I have a foot in the door. So it's on me to fuck it up or to take it somewhere. So yeah, I got a letter back from him. The shocking thing to me, because I think that I was expecting this bloodthirsty fucking animal, and he was so goddamn boring that it hurt. Painfully boring that he had no personality. And I think that's part of why he became what he became, because honestly, had he not so brutally murdered these people and put, his stamp on it, he would have been such an unremarkable person. He would have been a fart in the wind. His letter, I was just, what kind of cars do you like? Really just general mundane shit. And then out of nowhere in the middle of the letter, it says, hey, maybe you can go to the beach and take pictures of girls in bikinis for me. And I was like, there's the Richard Ramirez that I was expecting. But for the most part, the guy was boring.
So that surprised you, because all you've heard and seen online and in the news is this man who walks into people's homes, right, and wakes them up, and
just fucking slaughtering them, writing pentagrams in their blood. And you got to think, you're like, oh my God, this guy's a maniac. And then you get this really dull letter, and you're just like, wow, that's the same guy. So all the expectations for me were broken, and then I had to adjust to seeing them as human beings and not as their crimes.
Based on his courtroom theatrics and everything, and how he was playing to the camera and sticking his tongue out and things like that, he was probably aware that what he was doing. Like, he was just trying to freak people out. It wasn't just like an uncontrollable urge, right?
I think he manufactured all that because he wanted to be known for something. He wanted the celebrity, he wanted the attention. Outside of that, he had nothing else to get him that attention he wanted or anything. I do think, I'm not saying he murdered people because he wanted attention and stuff solely. I think he is every bit as bad as he's portrayed to be, and that's genuine. He took advantage of the idea of celebrity for it all, because he wasn't the first that the news lines blew that stuff up about.
So did that deter you from writing more letters? Were you thinking, wow, if they're all going to be this boring, why am I doing this? Or did that motivate you to dig deeper and see what more you could get from others?
Yeah, no, it absolutely motivated me to dig deeper, because you really see the pathology there. And Richard Ramirez wasn't that. He pretty much carried himself that, he was a fucking slime ball, But you have these other serial killers who carry themselves quite well, and they, family men, church going guys, and all that stuff. And they're out there, murdering innocent people. And so once you realize that pathology is there, a lot of them are very manipulative. You stop trying to process what they're telling you and taking what they're telling you at face value, and instead you have to analyze exactly what they're saying, but how they're saying it, how they're coming off, how they're presenting, and you have to dig into everything about that to really get a picture of them. And you have to know what to spot. It's there. They're complex.
So you're saying they're giving you kind of hints or clues to keep the conversation going and kind of ask them about their interests in their initial letters.
It runs the gamut. And that was another thing is people like the idea that serial killers are this, they're a generic cookie cutter of each other. And that's not the case. They all very much have their own personalities. You have to get to know their personality to know how they manipulate and when they're being manipulative and things like that. You can't go into it with a cookie cutter mentality. It doesn't work.
Was there anybody that you corresponded with that you got the sense that they knew that they were insane?
They knew that they were insane?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. My focus was serial killers, mass murder, spree killers, a couple of domestic terrorists, school shooters. There's personality disorders. You can see some mental illness. Some of them it's severe. Really, they should be in hospitals. Some of them it's not that bad, but it's there. But I've never encountered anyone that was like, I'm fucking crazy and this and that. I mean, probably the most self-aware of their mental state. There's a school shooter in Kentucky named Michael Carneal. He is a schizophrenic. He knows he's a schizophrenic. He was on a lot of medication when I spoke with him. He still exhibited a lot of symptoms and things like that, but he acknowledged his mental illness. That doesn't happen a lot.
I think that's something that I didn't realize would be so fascinating to me after reading the article and listening to you speak, is if someone would actually acknowledge that to you.
Yeah, I mean, he was rare in that sense. There's another guy, he murdered an actress named Rebecca Schaefer. His name is John Bardo. Bardo would write me sometimes 3-4 letters a day, and they were the envelope was just scribbled with stuff saying, to my friend, this and that. I mean, it was how you think a crazy person would write you a letter. That's him. And his letters were the same way, just nonsensical scribble, no fluent idea of conversation, nothing like that. A lot of random shit, and him asking me for photos and addresses of other celebrities. He was in there for stalking and murdering an actress. And he would tell me, I saw one of the Menendez brothers on the yard today, and treating like they were a celebrity. And I don't know if he's aware of his mental illness, but the guy's very mentally ill.
Okay, so just to touch on current events real quick with the Golden State Killer, and he is just like a stone wall basically, and he's not looking at the cameras. He's really not doing anything but looking straight ahead, other than being in a cage at one point. So that's a person that is on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like isn't interested in the media and seems to have control over himself, right?
Yeah. You have people like that as well. I mean, I can't imagine he's ever gonna, come clean with everything. I can't imagine he's gonna talk to investigators or he would respond to a letter or anything like that. I think he wants nothing to do with that stuff.
Do you have any urge? I know you haven't done this in a little while, but do you have any urge to write him?
Yeah, I'd like to. I don't think now's the right time. Timing plays a role in contacting these people. At some point, I would like to attempt to talk to him, but I wouldn't get my hopes up that he wants to talk to me.
How did you decide who to write?
I was drawn to cases of people who committed exceptionally heinous or brutal murders as juveniles. I found that to be really interesting. Serial killers, I wrote suspected serial killers. It wasn't like I was picking out the name brand people or whoever grabbed the headline. I pretty much went after whoever I could if they met my criteria of interest.
What was the response rate?
It's hard to put in a percentage or anything like that. Some I got, some I didn't get. It's a roll of the dice. I know a couple other people that wrote to inmates because, you do this and you find people with similar interests, and a couple of them may get, these people, they got them because they might do something that I wouldn't do. They might give them money or whatever the case, and I had my agenda. I might send them money for postage or phone time for them to call me, but I wasn't putting money on their commissary and or selling their poetry or whatever shit they were peddling. And maybe some other people will, and they'll write those people because they have something to offer them. If I didn't have anything to offer them, then they might not have written me back. So, and that's fine.
So you said that by doing this, you meet other people who are like-minded and do the same thing. So there was almost like a community of people like that. And did you guys get together and did you say like, who wrote back to you or who did you talk to?
I know one person like that. If he got somebody that I couldn't get, or if I got somebody that he couldn't get, it would be like, hey, can you put in a word for me with this person or that person? Not so much a community. You look online and all that, you see the murderabilia and stuff like that. You might not share the same purpose, but you're doing the same thing. So, I mean, it's you might find a couple people that you have more in common with. You're not collecting names so much, but you do want to talk to them. But regardless of your purpose, this guy may want to sell their shit and make some money, but I may want to, have the conversation and get to, maybe understand them better or learn something from them.
What's the weirdest correspondence you've had?
Well, weird in what sense?
I don't know.
You open the letter, you start reading, and you're like, I don't know if I can finish this.
Okay, yeah. I've had a couple of those. There's a guy named Haddon Clark in Maryland. And Haddon Clark has multiple personalities. Very bad guy. He murdered a little girl. He murdered another woman, admitted to cannibalism, claims he's murdered more people. You have to address his appropriate personality when you want to talk to him. So according to him, it was, don't quote me here, but I think his female personality was Christina or Kelly or something like that. And if you wanted to discuss the murders, you had to refer to that personality, and he would respond in that personality. If he was making artwork, you had to address him as Mr. Bunny Rabbit, I think it was. One letter, he asked me to send him photos of little girls in dresses. Yeah, it was unfucking believable. I mean, you want to tell that guy to fuck off. It's horrible shit. Trying to remain civil throughout that and not to damage the rapport. It's fucking tough, but yeah, he was pretty out there. There's a serial killer in California named Philip Jablonski. He was one of the first that wrote me back. He makes no bones about what he is. Horrible serial killer. Murdered his ex-wife, her mother, sexually assaulted the victims, murdered and mutilated a woman he went to college with. Tried to rape his own mother at one point when he was in prison the first time. I mean, horrible guy. And he'll send you letters and drawings and things like that, just mocking his victims and saying, oh, I had a visit today and there's a 3-year-old running around in the cage next to me and I just wanted to rape and kill it. And you're just like, oh my fucking God, it's unbelievable. You're not used to hearing anybody ever be like, hey, you see that little kid over there? I want to kill that kid, and you don't get used to it. And it's fucking just repugnant every time. But I mean, dealing with that and confronting that this person can or will do that. And, I mean, you have to figure it out on the fly how you want to proceed with it. But I mean, yeah, it's there. It's weird. It's weird. It's not something you encounter all the time.
I'm trying to figure out how I would react to reading that. Like you just said that. You said you don't have a conversation with somebody and that's something that they tell you every day and you just move on.
And I think the part that it's genuine behind it, because anyone can blurt out some stupid shit, but these guys they're being themselves.
When you first read these things, because you're reading this in a letter from Philip Jablonski, were you just like, this can't be real? This guy's full of shit. Did it just not compute in your brain at first?
No, I mean, he's very fantasy driven. He likes to play on that. Would he actually do it had someone open that cage and he could access that? I think he would. I don't think it's serial killer bravado or anything like that. I don't think he's trying. He may say some of that stuff to try and shock and I'm the serial killer but no, at the end of the day, I think he means it.
So that's someone who just seems to not be able to control themselves at all.
No, he doesn't try. He doesn't try at all. You get some like that, but for the most part, they're not like that. It's very rare in that sense. And I think a lot of people think that they are that upfront and everything. They're not. They're not. He's very rare. Him and there's another guy named Jack Spillman in Washington who it's some of the most horrific mutilation murders you could imagine. Spillman makes no bones about what he is. I mean, he's, same thing, would ask me pictures of women who look sick, send him pictures of that. Yeah, just weird shit. And, he brags about his crimes and stuff. And not in a sense that he's trying to impress, but in a sense that he wants to talk about, he loves to talk about it. He openly admits he loves blood and gore. And I mean, it's surreal.
I have 2 points. One real quick. I just looked up Jablonski. If I saw this guy on the street, I'd turn around. This guy looks like exactly what you were describing. What do you do in response to that when someone, who is it, Spillman?
Spillman, yeah.
Who asks you for pictures of sick women?
I do reply. I don't go Google sick-looking women and print out pictures and send it to them, but you have to learn how to navigate these things. And I seriously get at least 2 or 3, messages on Twitter a week from people going, hey, how should I go about this? And I want to do this, but they don't consider all these things. And I tell them, I say, well, you have to know how to deal with it. That's part of it. If not, then you won't have any success and it's not worth doing.
And also they should be completely prepared with what it's going to do to them psychologically. I don't know if people actually understand what it can do to read that.
I myself had horrible, horrible nightmares. It will affect you negatively. It does. And I mean, there's been instances of FBI agents having some, post-traumatic issues with speaking with these people. And I mean, it's very ugly stuff, and you're surrounding yourself with it. And you're jumping right into the fire. And yeah, there are negative effects. I personally have dealt with them. That's part of it.
Can you tell us about Barry Lucatus?
Yeah, Barry was, I believe, 14 years old in, I want to say 97 or 98, something around that time. He went to a school and went to algebra class with a gun and murdered the teacher, shot some students. I guess he was going to take all of them hostage. So I wrote Barry. Barry wrote me back. Super smart guy. This really bright, intelligent guy. We had a lot in common. Me and Barry just got along really, really well. I wouldn't say that I was friendly with a lot of people, but I wouldn't say that I was friends with him. Barry, I consider a friend.
And why do you consider him a friend?
I get along with him really well. I haven't spoken to him in a long time, but him and we got along really well. The thing that was able for me to break down the barrier that I always kept between myself and the inmate, Barry was horribly remorseful for his crime. And it was very, very genuine. Some of them, you're only like that because you're in prison. We let you out, you're going to go right back to what you were doing. But Barry was extremely sincere. He had nothing to gain from it. He had nothing to lose from it. He's never getting out of prison. That sincerity for his remorse, it was very genuine in his actions and in his words. It's not just like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have done that. I mean, he won't talk to journalists because he feels it's disrespectful to his victims. He won't do any interviews, things like that. He tells me that he's racked with guilt. He gets depressed, and Barry he's a human who made horrible choices as a juvenile. I know juveniles they're still developing and everything like that. And some you go on, they don't feel remorse for their crimes. Barry was very, very remorseful. So I was able to drop the barrier that I keep between myself and Barry, I consider a friend.
So that's two total ends of the spectrum, right? One person who shows some kind of incredible remorse, actually, and someone like Jablonski or Spillman.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get everything in between. You get the guys who are proud of their crimes, and you get the guys, they say they're remorseful, And then you have Barry, who is a rare case that I've come across.
When you were talking about the handwriting and you get letters and it's all scribbled and you're able to look at that, and I'm sure if it's a complete disaster and chaos on the paper, you can sort of get the idea that this person probably isn't in their right state of mind. Was there any letter that you opened and you looked at and you said, wow, this guy's got some pretty decent handwriting and is very articulate?
I mean, there's several that are very articulate, well-spoken, intelligent people. Whitey Bulger, he has some very pretty handwriting. I wouldn't say he's intelligent, but he's very likable. He's a very likable guy.
Did Whitey Bulger ever mention the Gardner heist in any of your correspondence with him?
No, but I mean, at that point, he kind of knew he was pretty fucked. So he's old. He was old when he got caught a few years ago. He's old now. He was surprisingly candid. I mean, he urged me not to live a life of crime. though I told him, I said, well, I have no interest in that. He would tell me about his family. He would tell me about doing time in Alcatraz. I think at the time he was one of 11 people still alive that did time in Alcatraz. Hearing someone who was in Alcatraz tell you stories is surreal. I asked him about the famous escape from Alcatraz. I said, do you think they made it? He goes, I know for a fact they made it, but he never went into detail. And he tells you just the crazy. I mean, this guy was so powerful, and he was the number 2 most wanted man in America behind Osama bin Laden. Only when did bin Laden die, he became the most wanted. But I mean, the stories he told and everything, and just how he comes. At the time, he was a bit depressed, knowing that he's going to die in prison, or possibly be trucked around to different states to face the death penalty or whatever the case. So he was a bit in the dumps, but even then he was still surprisingly affable.
If he had mentioned something about the Gardner heist or any open investigation, would that have been redacted before it came to your address?
I don't think so. He's told me about stuff he did when he was on the run. He mentioned a letter I specifically said I never killed any women or FBI agents, like really tried to get that across, which I don't believe I ever forced that issue of, wanting information on any murders or any specific thing, but he felt it necessary to make it a point to me that I know that.
Have you ever been visited by law enforcement because of the correspondence, especially with Whitey Bulger?
No, I've spoken to a few more where I thought for sure that they Terry Nichols, the Oklahoma City bomber co-conspirator, I thought absolutely I'd be getting a knock on my door. All their mail, their phone calls, all that stuff is all, recorded or read. I think if there's anything that set off any alarms or was unsettling, they probably would have wanted to talk to me by now. But I mean, that just goes to show my intentions, and I do portray them genuinely. I don't, there's nothing deviant to what I'm doing.
Have you thought about publishing these letters in a book or something?
They're all gone. I got rid of everything. So I really don't have much left. I have my letters from Barry, and I have, a few letters here and there from people. I pretty much, I sold everything, all the art, all the, photos, poetry, everything they sent me, the letters. I didn't want it around. I didn't want my children to, at some point find it and inquire about that. It makes my wife uncomfortable. Quite honestly, it got to a point where it made me uncomfortable. So I made the decision to part with all that stuff. If someone else can find use in it, fantastic. If say one of my letters is floating around and they buy it because it's they have an interest in this and it pushes them further, and hey, maybe they want to pursue a career as a detective or in forensics or whatever the case, I'm glad that I could be the catalyst for that. But I didn't see it necessary to publish a book or anything like that and profit off of that. I don't know. That just wasn't for me.
Do you think the entire experience has made you a better human?
I think it's enlightened me in several ways. I think having to be more patient, calm, being tolerant. I mean, it's very hard to be tolerant with some of these people, but you have to be, and you have to tolerate them bullshitting you, their manipulations, or them, being outright offensive or offensive to their victims, which, a lot of people won't stand for. I don't want to stand for it, but I don't know that it's changed me or bettered me or anything like that. I don't know. I'm still the same person. So
I couldn't help but notice that you have a similar tattoo on your hand as Richard Ramirez.
I do. Since I was very young, I got into, the philosophies of Satanism and things like that. Today, I'm a strong supporter of the Satanic Temple. I'm not a member of anything. I am a big supporter of the Satanic Temple, what they do as an organization and all that. I support the shit out of them. I am an atheist. However, I do reject Christianity as a valid belief. I think it's stupid. I don't think that people have to tolerate other people's beliefs. We don't have to respect them. I have a tattoo of a pentagram on my left hand to symbolize the left-hand path. Basically, I'm the opposite of the Christian way and all that stuff. And I'm fine with letting that be known. It's not an homage to Ramirez. He, the dipshit kind of ruined it for people like me.
We are also supporters of the Satanic Temple as well. We've made friends with Lucien Greaves. We did a live show with him. Really, really amazing, articulate, brilliant. I'd say brilliant man.
That guy's something else. He's leaps and bounds above where society is. And I mean, I really wish more people would have the open mind to give him a chance to listen to the guy, because what they're putting out there in the world is for human rights, and it's great. It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
He's got an incredible sense of humor whenever somebody tries to shut him down in a really naive, ignorant way.
I definitely dig that guy.
Yeah, he threatened to kill me during the live show.
Really?
It was a veiled threat.
In a joking way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
what are you going to do about that?
And I was asking for it.
One quick question for Lucien. I know that Tim was particularly terrified to be here this evening. I just want you to just assure him that you did not steal his soul during this.
No, I'm going to kill him.
Oh.
But no, it was actually really intimidating talking to him because of how intelligent he is.
From everything that I've seen from him, the guy's, he's brilliant socially. I mean, he's so aware. Like I said, he's 2 steps ahead of everything. I think society's heading in his direction. I think he's ahead of his time right now.
Speaking of religion, were there any letters that you got that people had just 100% committed themselves to a religious belief as a way to make good in their own head?
I definitely got a good amount of religious stuff. Robert Yates, the Spokane serial killer in Washington, I guess after he was sent to death row, he became a born-again Christian, would send me quotes from the Bible, things like that. And, you get some people like him, and they thump their Bibles. Son of Sam is Son of Hope now. He has his own prison ministry. Ramon Salcedo, he's on death row in San Quentin. He murdered several people. He tried to murder his own children. One of his children survived. She was in a pile of trash or something for a day with her throat slit before someone found her. This guy is sending me 10 pages of religious literature and all his bullshit that he preaches from death row. I mean, yeah, a lot of them convert to religion. Barry was an open and honest atheist. That's something that him and I had in common. There was a guy out of Ohio named Nathan Brooks. Nathan Brooks, I wrote for the reason that his crime was associated with religion. When he was 16, he came home and he shot his mother and father, decapitated his father, put his head in a punch bowl for a ritual. He identified with theistic Satanism at the time. He had a list. He was going to kill more people. He was found, I believe, that day or the next day in a cemetery where he was arrested. He was going to kill his brother and a bunch of other people. And when I asked him to explain it, he said he felt that he had to do something so horribly wrong that there's no way that he'd ever go to heaven. And that's how he rationalized that. And then you speak with him now. That was in the 90s. You speak with him now. He's older. He's real into yoga. I can't remember if he identifies with atheism or whatever. I don't think he has any sort of Christian or theistic belief now. He's very based in science, refers to people as organisms, things like that, where it's not, the guy's not wrong and not knowing, you think he's a bit out there, but you're like, he's not, he's just different, but he's not wrong on anything.
So if you weren't an atheist before you started this process, you might have been afterwards, after hearing, again, the spectrum of where these people are on like how religious they are or what religion they are. And it's like, well, this is just just a mess. Like there's no patterns here whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, you don't look for patterns. That's the thing is I think with a lot of this is people are looking for patterns, and you have to go the opposite direction. You have to see how these people are different because, see, I think the initial FBI, when they started the behavioral analysis program, their idea was patterns and inducting these guys and categorizing them and things like that. And we now know that that's obsolete now. That was a great foundation and it's a great reference. But at the end of the day, you have to look at things, you have to look at the people individually, and you have to be realistic that they're not all the same, and you can't assume anything really. I mean, it's all over the place.
So follow up to that question about making you a better human, was it worth it?
Absolutely. I feel the experience taught me a lot, and that's initially why I did it, because I couldn't get deep enough, and still, even now, I still can't get deep enough. There's no amount of books or information or any of that'll scratch the itch. It's never going to get scratched. I'm glad I did it. Maybe in the future, I think what happened, why I stopped, is because it got to a point where I felt I wasn't really learning as much. I felt that I kind of got somewhere with it. I think if a unique criminal comes along that I would have the opportunity to speak with, I might take it. I mean, Todd Colehep was arrested recently in South Carolina. That guy is distinctive. A lot of people don't think about this, but he is both a mass murderer and a serial killer. You know, he had an episode where he murdered 4 people in one location, and that was its own event. But he also had this sexually motivated element to keep people captive and murder people in that sense related to that. That's very unique. You don't see that a lot. You don't see people who cross back and forth, mass murderer, serial killer. I mean, and he has both titles.
That's a great point. Yeah. Do you think that serial killers, like the amount of them in the country at least, has gone down? Has it shifted to mass shooters and school shooters?
I think people like to think that. I think the media has shifted to that. Do I think that serial killers have gone away? No. I think they're very adaptive. I think they adapt to technology. They grow. I think it was in 97, you had John Robinson, who is coined as the first internet serial killer. And you've had several, Craigslist killers and things like that. And I think they'll adapt to technology. I think they'll adapt to how these crimes are being investigated. I don't know that serial killers are going away. I don't know that it's fading, and people like to think that, and the mass shootings are horrible, and they seem to be getting increasingly horrible. I remember when Pulse happened, I worked right down the street from Pulse. When Pulse was happening, I was leaving work, walking to my car. The police cars were zooming by me, ambulances. I could see from where I parked, I was just blocks away from Pulse. I could see what was going on down there. And, it's bad. It's very prevalent now in society. Yeah, I don't know that serial killers are going away. Everything that's driven them still drives people to do that stuff. They will just adapt to society and to technology and everything, and they'll be around. Unfortunately.
Was there one that you regret not having the opportunity to write and correspond with?
Gosh, Kemper, never heard from him. Heard he doesn't talk much to people. Joel Rifkin, never got anything back from Rifkin. There's a guy in Wisconsin who I think he's only convicted of maybe one murder, potentially a serial killer, attacked his own wife, assaulted his wife. Just horrible. Just brutal. Some of the most horrific torture that I've heard of. I guess he's real shut in, and his name's John Weber. Never heard anything back from him. There's a handful of people.
This has been an incredible conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. I look forward to several more podcasts from you guys in the future. I am a listener now, so
awesome. Thanks.
Keep rolling.